Let's go to story of an hour. Okay, so I've already pulled it to the part of the story that I want to analyze. I'm seeking a particular quote, which you'll do as well. It's hard to pick sometimes just one, but we'll start with that and we'll build. Of course, we'll build as we do literary arguments that are a little longer. And this is the quote that I just love. I find this to be the climax of the story, where everything peaks before it starts to unfold and the falling action takes over. So Chopin writes, there would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. I like to picture Kate Chopin writing this in St. Louis, where she grew up, where I grew up. This was published in 1894. I picture them living in some mansion off the Forest Park Parkway where I used to go and play. These old stately homes that are like 150 years old. I picture parlors and, of course, inner rooms and upstairs rooms and maybe the kind of house that has a room for the woman and a room for the man, and they don't sleep in the same room. And that's where I picture Mrs. Mallard looking out the window at the trees. In 1894, in St. Louis or anywhere, it is really tempting to read this as a feminist text. And indeed, that is a reading. And in this character of Mrs. Mallard, we might see an original feminist. I think I like this quote, though, because it is far more universal. She writes, the blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. And so here, the character of Mrs. Mallard has this deep insight, lasts a fleeting moment or maybe an hour, where she realizes that her husband, however kind, however well-intentioned, has been, as we do, trying to impose his private will on her. And she has the eyes to see that everybody does this to each other. Certainly, the structures of society made it more likely that a man could, using his political and socioeconomic power, impose that private will. But equally, she writes that a woman could do the same. So Mrs. Mallard has an intellect that is beyond place and time and is instead human. It is an insight rooted in the way that we are human, and that what we seek above all is control of our lives, no matter the power that we have or don't have as the world sees it. We have our individual power, and we try to impose it on somebody else. In this case, she realizes that she has been the victim of that. But I think she also realizes here she could herself do the same to someone else. And what her husband's death means to her is not just that she no longer has to be that victim, but she will not be either an oppressor. She will simply live for herself. The freedom of knowing that she is not shackled to anybody at all is what gives her such joy in these moments, the monstrous joy she describes. I say all of this because of this last sentence. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. So here we know we're inside of her mind because she is looking upon it. A kind intention or a cruel intention. I'm just amazed at this language because it is so universal. It does not matter if her husband is kind or seeks her best interests. The thing that matters is the will and the power that one has over someone else. And I hear this even now. I didn't mean to do it that way. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. We talk about intention as if it is the truth, instead of looking deeper into it, below the intention, which is our desire for power. And Mrs. Mallard, amazingly, in this short story, hits the nail on the head. And then it makes it easier for me to understand just how devastating it is when she is told at the end of this story, those shekels are back. So in this character revelation, what I find the most about Mrs. Mallard that I'm inspired by is the depth of her intellectual life. And that is my analysis.